So on my left, I have the iPhone 14 Pro, and on the right, I have the iPhone 13 Pro. And I'll quickly go through my top 5 differences when it comes to the cameras on these two phones. So the first difference really is the sheer size of those cameras on the iPhone 14 Pro. They look slightly bigger than the ones on the 13 Pro. But in actual sense, these are actually bigger cameras in terms of megapixels, in terms of the sensor. So on the iPhone 14 Pro, we have a 48 megapixel main camera at the back compared to 12 megapixels on the 13 Pro. And also inside that camera enclosure is a 65% larger sensor than the one on the iPhone 13 Pro. And this mainly means a few things: better photography, better detail, more light in low lit situations. You're going to get better shallow depth of field. Overall, you should get better photo quality. Now, of course, I'll be testing these cameras, I'll be taking photos with them, and I'll be showing you the side-by-side comparison between the two cameras. Next is action mode. So the iPhone 14 sports a brand new feature inside the camera. If you launch the camera and then go to video mode, you should get a new option here. And if you toggle that on, it enables action mode. Now, action mode, the way it works, it basically crops in a little on the video, and it uses that latitude to improve the stabilization of the video. So you can use this mode when you're chasing subjects, or when you're recording videos while walking, or when running. You simply just enable action mode, and it's going to improve the stabilization of the video. You're going to get much smoother footage. Now, as a pro tip, anytime you enable the action mode, it's going to default to the 0.5x camera. So make sure you tap on the main camera so you can use the action mode on the main camera. And you can use action mode in up to 2.8K at 60 frames per second. So that should give you very good stable footage. Also, on the iPhone 14 Pro, due to that bigger and better 48 megapixel camera, you can now shoot 48 megapixel ProRes photos. To do that, first of all, go to the settings, and then under settings, go to the camera, and then under camera, tap on formats. And as you can see, the Apple ProRes, if you enable that, you can actually shoot 48 megapixel ProRes photos with your iPhone 14 Pro camera. Now, the iPhone 13 Pro also can shoot in ProRes, but it limits that to 12 megapixel ProRes photos. And of course, the more detail you have in the ProRes photos gives you much more detail and much more data that you can play around with in Photoshop or any other photo editing app that you use. Next is improved cinematic mode. Now, we did have cinematic mode in iPhone 13 Pro, but it maxed out at 4K 24 frames per second. Now that gets a slight improvement on the 14 Pro, which actually sounds like a slight improvement on paper, but it does mean a lot to people who shoot in cinematic mode in 4K. So on the iPhone 14 Pro, if you go to cinematic mode, you can actually shoot cinematic mode in 4K 30 frames per second. So that should mean better, more crispier footage, more frames per second. It means different things to different people, but there you go. That's a new improved feature. Lastly, it's ProRes video. Now, you could shoot ProRes video on the iPhone 13 Pro, but if you went to settings and then go to camera and go to formats, and then under format you go to ProRes, you can enable ProRes because you can shoot ProRes with the iPhone 13 Pro, but it maxed out at 1080p in 30 frames per second, which isn't quite impressive. What's impressive is the ProRes on your iPhone 14, which if you go to the same settings page, go to camera and go to formats, you have ProRes, and in ProRes on your iPhone 14 Pro, you can actually get 4K at 30 frames per second and 1080p in up to 60 frames per second. I don't think anyone will be using 1080p, so let's concentrate on 4K 30 frames per second in ProRes. That's a huge improvement, especially for people who record a lot of video on their phones. That should mean something. Anyway, so those are my top 5 new camera features on the iPhone 14 Pro compared to the iPhone 13 Pro. Thanks for watching. Leave your comments and questions down below, and good luck.